Hello, this is Gökmen Altay. I will present the 19th system in Quran text. In particular, I will present the rewriting key code and pattern-based 19th system in Quran text today. And today's date is January 2025. The presentation was presented 12/31/2024. I have PhD in error control codes of telecommunications, which is directly related to the topic I will present in this presentation. You can see my book and social media links from the screen. And you can also read the disclaimer from my book, chapter 2.5. Also read from the screen. If you want to pause and read, feel free to do so. In short, I do not claim to present the absolute truth. Only God knows best, and only He knows whether all or some or none of the codes that I discovered and presented in this book were in fact designed by God, or all we observe is just the result of an extremely small random chance. As a scientist who has a PhD in error control coding, or we can say message coding, I can only search for available codes for a potential system and try my best to define its rules. If what I observe is a rule-based system, and then using the rules, I can get the number of trials and successes and failures, and then I can measure the probability of what I observe. The probability of the overall system is extremely small, as you can see in my book. The rules are also meaningful and quite general. Therefore, my expert level educated conclusion is that there is a miraculous 19 system in design over the text of Quran, and it indicates that the text of Quran is intact as we Muslims expected. Nonetheless, it's a big sin to claim anything incorrect on behalf of God. I fear from God and make it clear that all my claims are just my best conclusion over what I observe. Only God knows best. My conclusion might be correct or false. The 19th system I discovered and presented might be fully or partially be correct, or even might be the result of mere coincidence, as there is still that extreme measured small probability of observing them by chance alone. So basically, you can do your own judgment. You can look at this presentation and this study and my book as an academic book, as a technical book, and it just presents what I discovered and observed from the book, from the text of Quran, and feel free to do your own judgment and analysis. Overview of the presentation. Topics for the 19th system of Quran is overviewed. The rewriting key code and pattern-based codes of the 19th system of Quran was published in my book, will be presented here in particular. There are other codes, other system parts that you can see in my book and read them as well. And this system part has around 7 code pairs. Each of the 7 code pairs are based on key code and patterns observed like from clues in Quran. Introduction to the 19th system in Quran. It's based on all the 6,348 verses of Quran. So it covers all the verses. Nothing has changed. Nothing was manipulated, as we have seen from the Muslims in their homes. And it's based on the Hafs manuscript in particular. Not all the evidence codes I presented in my book and in this presentation were discovered by myself from 2019 to 2024. And my claim, there is 19-based numerical coding system over the text of Quran in all the 6,348 verses. It suggests that the text of Quran is intact and unchanged until the last word and even to the last letter of it. Otherwise, we would not witness the system we observe. Is such a claim scientifically based? As a PhD level expert in telecommunications, when I first heard about similar claims, it made perfect sense to me because all the modern message communications have codes with error control coding algorithms to make sure the communication is error-free at the receiver side. Quran is also a message from God to humanity. Why not it also has error control coding over its message text so that we humans can understand that the message Quran is error-free and unchanged. Most common objections, one of the three slides about that, and my answer shortly. You can find quotes in all texts, which comes a lot. This objection is categorically false, although it has some truths in that for a random numerical analysis or numerology studies. But from a scientific point of view, this objection is categorically false because this implies that no text can be coded. If an author wants similar to the error-controlled coding science, she can embed codes in their text to make sure that the text is not distorted and intact in its entirety. One needs to check if the system is real or random, instead of just categorically claiming all text you can find codes in all texts. Second most common objections I get, and my answer, why did you use this Quran text but not others? I use the most common version of Quran recitation, which is Hafs. It is used by 97% of Muslims. It is the Quran sent down. You can see Dr. Shehzad Salim's book for historical details about that. So other than the Hafs manuscripts, they are not the one that's sent down. But some Muslims still follow it, still consider them as the Quran as well. My hypothesis is this: as long as there is no mistake regarding classical Arabic grammar, we can use any Hafs text to test our coding system over it. See my book for the details of the text I used. I did not work on any other versions of Hafs text. Researchers should feel free to test them, as I do not claim that the others are incorrect. I only claim that there is a strong 19-base system over the Hafs text I used, and it suggests that Quran has a 19-base coding system over it, and thus it suggests that it is not changed. Another most common objection, mostly from the brainwashed Islamophobes, I see that. Even if there is such a system, I will not believe it, as Muslims look violent and backwards. First, the Western media exaggerates. 1.8 billion Muslims around the world are 99.9% peaceful. Jews could find refuge in Ottoman Empire in history while they were expelled from Westerners throughout history. And that's a fact. Christians, Jews lived under Muslim-ruling countries throughout history, and they kept their religion, even their language, and so on, all their culture. So history just disproves that claim anyways. Also, Christians, etc., lived under Islamic states hundreds of years while practicing their own religion, as I mentioned. Second, the Islam from God is only in Quran. There is no violence, etc., in Quran, except for self-defense, if we consider the Quran with all verses together, not just cherry pick. The Muslims do not follow on the Quran. This is a fact. They follow Quran plus narrations. I mean, not all Muslims, but most of them. Claimed reports, the narrations are claimed hadith reports from Prophet Muhammad, and they call it hadiths, as if they are 100% correct. They also follow plus famous early scholars. So they have multiple sources of their religion. They all say they are Muslims, but they all have their own branch. Actually, they all have different religion, different versions of Islam, but only one of them is truth, and that is the one sourced by only Quran. So their religions are distorted version of Islam, which they call mazhabs, or branches sects of their Islam, or the tradition in general term. So I suggest following only Quran, which is the undistorted original religion from God, and then you don't see any backwards or violent examples you cannot find in the source. Why Muslims believe unchanged Quran? Some verses of Quran seem to suggest the claim. Muslims believe the Quran is unchanged regarding primarily to this verse, Quran chapter 15, verse 9. It is we who have sent down the reminder. And indeed it is we who will preserve it. Let me read again. It is we who have sent down the reminder, and indeed it is we who will preserve it. And why number 19 but not the other number? There is only one independent verse in Quran that specifically stresses on a single number, and that is 19. That's why. So we don't cherry pick any number that fits our design. It's a claim. Quran chapter 74, verse 30 says this. Over it is 19 and nothing else. And then it's an independent verse. You have to look at before and after to understand its meaning. But it also might refer a system over 19. And the following verse of that says this. Chapter 74, 31 also says, it will increase the belief of the believers and the clear doubts of the people of the book, like Christians, Jewish people, etc. So it should have a function to increase the belief of the believers and the clear the doubts of the people of the book, which perfectly fits the function of this claim. So why numbered coding system? There are verses and clear codes in Quran that suggest that there might be a 19-based numbered system over the text of Quran. Here are some examples. For example, chapter 83, verse 20, a numbered book it is. An independent verse, again, says, a numbered book it is. It is 2 words and 9 letters. So when we see Quran says a numbered book it is, we might ask, so how is it numbered? We can find the same answer, the answer to this question, how is it numbered, in this exact verse. So therefore, this is one of the key verses to understand the coding system of Quran. So I have 3 sources I will mention, but one of them is this one, and it comes out from this question. Quran says a numbered book it is, then we ask question, how is it numbered? And how is it numbered is observed in the same verse, like that. For example, these are 2 clear examples of the code patterns. It is 2 words and 9 letters. It has 2 clear codes as this. Chapter 83, verse 20, it has 2 words and 9 letters. When we concatenate them, we get this coding number, 83, 20, 29. And it is multiple of 19, like this. And even more, there is second one, very clearly observed in the same natural numbers of the text. We don't invent anything here. If we just make the sum operation, 83 plus 20 plus 2 plus 9, we get 114, which is the number of chapters of Quran, and which means 19 times 6. So from this verse, the meaning of this verse perfectly matches to the number 19 coding system. It shows us clues, and we can see how is it numbered. We can see the answer for how is it numbered. By testing these key coding patterns over the text of Quran, which I did. And when I discovered that, okay, I made the hypothesis, okay, if this verse says the Quran is numbered, then it might have, how is it numbered? It might have the clues about how is it numbered. And when I saw these, I discovered and saw these code patterns in this verse, when I tested them over the text of Quran, full text of Quran, I observed these coding patterns, key coding patterns, also exist over the full text of Quran too. Therefore, I got the conclusion that they were left as clues, and Quran has a number 19-based system. Of course, these are not the only ones, but even from these simple-looking coding patterns and the meaning of the verse together shows us a clear 19-based coding system. So both key coding patterns exist over the full text of Quran. And by the way, 114 is the exact number of chapters of Quran, which is multiple of 19. Those are also simple signs that shows us that Quran is designed based on number 19, the text of Quran. So key coding patterns trials. Considering the rules, all the successful codes on Al-Fatiha, the Basmala verse, the Al-Fatiha means, for the ones who doesn't know, is the first chapter of Quran out of those 114. The first chapter of Al-Fatiha has 7 verses, and it is the most popular one among Muslims. Almost all of them memorize that because they use this chapter in their daily prayers. That's the kind of a must for most of them, although it's not. But everyone assumes this is a must, and they read this every day. And in this chapter, small chapter, we can see key coding patterns. We expect to find key coding patterns that represents the full text of Quran, which we see. And the second key coding pattern source is the Basmala verse, and this is again another most special verse in Quran. It is the first verse of Quran out of those 6,348 verses, and it also appears in in the beginning of 112 chapters out of 114, but as unnumbered. And also one numbered Basmala verse is the first verse of Quran, as I mentioned. In the Al-Fatiha, we find that. So in total, we have 113 Basmala verse. And it is not 114 if you look at the chapter, beginning of the chapters. But we also find another Basmala verse within one of the chapters. So in total, we have 114 Basmala verse, again, multiple of 19. So these are clear signs that Quran has a special design. And in this very verse, Basmala verse, we also find key coding patterns that is left as clue. I conclude, and we find those coding patterns, key coding patterns, over the full text of Quran too. So far, I have shown you there are 3 sources: Al-Fatiha, the first chapter, the first verse, Basmala verse, and the special verse 8320, as I showed before. And they are considered as key coding patterns. The codes from them are considered as key coding patterns and tested over the full text of Quran. As far as I could see, all the key coding patterns from the Al-Fatiha chapter and the Basmala verse and the verse 83 will also exist over the full text of Quran. So basically, based on my rules, I tested all the possible codes over these 3 sources, and the ones they were successful are assumed, okay, they are the ones, they were left as clues, they are the key coding patterns, and they were applied to the full text of Quran, and then I observed that they also existed over the full text of Quran too. Some codes, some key coding patterns, the successful ones over those key sources, 3 key sources, were equivalent, and in such cases, observing only one of them in the full text of Quran is considered to represent that key coding pattern in the full text of Quran. For instance, the general verse index and the special verse indexes were same in Al-Fatiha, which would give equivalent code as key coding pattern. So you might see some examples, but considering these equivalent ones, ignoring the equivalent ones, as far as I see, I have observed all the key coding patterns from these 3 sources over the full text of Quran, which suggests me the system. Rules of the system I presented in my book. Of course, these are just overview. You have to read my book to read the full explanation. Any system claim must have rules that defines it. Rules also must be meaningful. So if you don't have a system claim without rules and without also meaningful rules, just ignore them. And you can then make those objections about, all the texts might have some codes and so on. The system I discovered and present in my book, Reproducible Miracle, has meaningful rules that limit the possibility of testable codes that could be tried. See my book for the details of the rules. Only with the rules we can know the limits of the system and can calculate the probability of it. The text structure of Quran, for the ones who is not familiar with, I need to introduce. Quran has a different text structure than all the other books I know of. It has 6,348 verses in total, but 6,236 of them are numbered verses. These are the two separate text types of Quran over which we test the coding patterns. So we hypothesize there are coding designs over both of the texts, and we test them together. It has 112 unnumbered but repeated special verse called Besmele at the beginning of 112 chapters out of the 114 total chapters. In total, with Besmele verses, unnumbered Besmele verses, upon the 6,236 numbered verses, we get 6,348 total verses. But one is only numbered verses, and the other includes all of it. Only one chapter do not have Besmele verse at all, which is the chapter 9. First chapter is the only chapter the Besmele verse has number. There are 114, which means 19 times 6 Besmele verses in Quran, as one of them is within one of the verses in one of the chapters. There are also 114 chapters of Quran, again multiple of 19. Also, the first verse of Quran, Besmele, has these chapter index 1, verse index, special verse index 1, number of words 4, and the number of letters 19 numbers. And when we concatenate it, 1, 1, 4, this is already a multiple of 19. 19 is already a multiple of 19, and the concatenation of them, all of them together, is also multiple of 19 by the mathematical property. So when we just look at this verse, the first verse of Quran, we can see the clear 19 base codes appear to our eye, which suggests a clue. And if we test these over the full text of Quran, and we assume if they are left as clue, if this same coding pattern exists over the full text of Quran, which I did, and then I discovered the codes also exist, 19 base codes also exist based on these coding patterns over the full text of Quran too. By the way, this concatenation of all of these numbers, chapter, verse, word, and letters, was also the same coding pattern we observed from the chapter 8320 I had shown before. Here, 8329, the same coding pattern. It also exists over the Besmele verse. So the same exact coding pattern, key coding pattern, exists over the full text of Quran too, and which is very clear in the Quran, left as clues, in my opinion. Okay, let me enter now the system. The key coding pattern based system I will present here. The most important part of the codes that suggest a system together are the ones that are based on meaningful key coding patterns that we find in Quran, KCP in short. The key coding patterns are mainly based on the first chapter, Al-Fatiha, first verse Basmala, and the verse 8320, which is a numbered book it is. The key coding pattern-based approach of 19 system codes were introduced first time to the literature by myself in my book, Reproducible Miracle. There were some other claims about 19 system of Quran, which with different codes, different approaches, but none of them has key coding pattern-based approach. If you see any code claim, and that means they were either influenced by my study, if they don't make a citation. They were supposed to make a citation in that case. And the reason I could do that because of my PhD in this area, I thought I made a hypothesis based on the most meaningful approach. If there is such a system, how could we see them? How could we discover them? Then I tried those and then discovered the whole system. But key coding pattern-based system is first time introduced to the literature by myself in my book. And also, this is the only rule-based system, 19-based system claim in the literature that compared to the other claims. And this doesn't touch any text number, doesn't make any manipulation. Whatever I have downloaded from the server tanzil.net, I have used that text. and did not make any change at all. I will present only the key code and pattern-based codes in this presentation with respect to the rewriting code and pattern. There are also other key code and pattern-based code system. You can see in my book, which is based on solely on Al-Fatiha. But this presentation has the one with the letters. Whenever there is letters information with only a single text category, I assume it's a rewriting code and pattern. So I always test a rewriting direction of the codes from right to left, and I do never test from left to right. Even if there is a code, I just ignore them, assuming it might be random. So see my book for other interesting and important codes of the whole 19-base system of Quran. Okay, key code and pattern-based evidences including letters information. The rewriting Quran with its natural text numbers. The ultimate evidence, writing Quran with its verse level text numbers over all the 6,348 verses. This was actually one of my first discoveries in 2019 when I first published my book, and I was quite surprised because this was one of the first hypotheses that came to my mind. That was the most meaningful one, most natural one. I just wanted to see if I rewrite the Quran with its natural text numbers, could it be rewritten? Without seeing those key coding patterns in the Basmala, even that was very clear. I hadn't looked at it first. And then I tested it and I just discovered that to my surprise, because it was the most meaningful one, most natural one, it was there. Then later I realized that also existed in the Basmala verse, in the chapter 83, sorry, verse 83, verse 20 of chapter 83, 83-20, that what they were there as clues, as key coding patterns. And those key coding patterns have the most natural codings in it already. This is what I'm trying to say. Even if we didn't have those key coding patterns, this was very clear code, natural code in Quran that we could try. So let me explain the ultimate evidence. This code shows that Quran text can be rewritten with its natural text numbers as seen on the text. So from right to left on the text. This was the first important code I had discovered by trying the most natural approach to see if there are interesting codes in Quran. After discovering it, I was surprised and named it as the ultimate evidence. This is why I named this one. I don't name all the codes, but some of them which I'm quite impressed. The ultimate evidence. In 2019, when I first published my book. First key coding pattern of the ultimate evidence, we can see in the Basmala verse. The first verse of Quran has this clear key coding pattern. Chapter index 1, verse, special verse index 1, special verse index of this chapter 1. Number of words 4 in this verse, and number of letters in this verse 19. So when we concatenate them, we get 11419. That is the multiple of 19. And we assume this is left as key coding pattern. And when I test this over the full text of Quran, this key coding pattern exists over the full text of Quran of 6,348 verses, which is the ultimate code. I discovered this ultimate code in 2019. Second key coding pattern of the ultimate evidence, again, as I mentioned in chapter 83, verse 20, a numbered book it is. Then we ask the natural question, how is it numbered? And we find the answer over the text of the same verse as key coding patterns. It is 2 words and 9 letters. It has 2 clear key coding patterns as this, 83, 20, 29. When you concatenate, you get 83, 20, 19. And it's a multiple of 19. And 83, 20, 29 code, key coding pattern, is used as a key coding pattern for the ultimate evidence of this one. Basically, you do the exact same coding to all the verses and then put them into the verse that you see in the book, and you get a big number, and it is a multiple of 19. It's as simple as that. So the ultimate evidence based on key coding pattern, we apply this clear key coding pattern over all the 6,348 verses of Quran. As per the rule, whenever we have letters data of a single text type, we always use the writing direction of Arabic, which is right to left, as I consider this pattern as rewriting over a single text type. So we test this over both of the text types by the rules. We could also test this over the numbered verses only, like 6,236 of them. So we include these on the pre-built calculations. So we have 2 trials and 1 success, which is all of those verses in this case. In the ultimate evidence based on key coding pattern, I have illustrated in more detail here the first chapter, as we see here. We write the chapter index, first chapter index, and then the first verse index, special verse index, and then total words in the verse 1, and total letters in verse 1 of chapter 1. So we write this onto the most right. And then the next verse, chapter 1, verse 2, it goes until last chapter, chapter 114, the last verse of that chapter. And as we see, we have a big number by concatenating all of it. And if you replace numbers with real numbers, we get again decimal verse. Remember here, 11419, and then the second verse, chapter 1, verse 2. It again has 14 words, about 18 letters. We write those numbers from right to left. We apply the same coding pattern, and we just concatenate them together as well, naturally, on the same order, but from right to left, as always, not just cherry picking, because as a rule, whenever we have a letters information in the code, in a single text type, we test them from right to left. Even there's a code from left to right, I just ignore them. I assume they are random. I may be wrong, but this is based on my observation, and the rules have been defined to be as general as possible. That's why I have defined that way. People should feel free to search if there's other systems as well from different point of view. And if you continue concatenating them, we get these numbers together, and then in the end, we get this big number, which has 46,900 digits in it. And by the way, the digit sum of this number is exactly 19. The length of this number is exactly 19, as additional fact, not a system evidence. But this just kind of supports, ensures this ultimate code is important. It's an important one. Okay, and if you like to see the real number, 46,900 digits number, it is this one. From here, can we make it bigger now? Okay, from here to here. The last one, 114, is I can read here, and the first starts with 11419. That's basmala here. There's also a fact, the even odd code pair of the ultimate evidence, this is just a fact right now. I didn't include that into the system, but I put them if they are interesting in the book, because sometimes I discover other codes and then realize there's a system and rewrite my book with the new system I discover. This is interesting. If we replace basically, if we write the same code, same big code, 46,900 digits codes, by separating them to even and odd code pairs and then merging them again, like this one. Basmala came from the last one to the previous one, and this code here was, because it was the second verse, it is the even one. It came to the first. It is until all the verses, they are separate first, even and odd, and then merged together after changing their order against each other. Then we get even odd code pair version. And then if you look at this number, this big number, the same length digit, it's again multiple of 19. So this is just a fact. It might be an important code part of a system, maybe in the future someone might discover. So I just keep it here as a kind of supporting fact, not a evidence. And again, this is the number we observe. Okay, the ultimate evidence, and it's even odd code pair based on chapter level text data over the 6,230 numbered verses. So the ultimate evidence also exists over the chapter level data. So far, we have observed the ultimate evidence on the verse level data per verse. But if you look at the same coding pattern over the chapter level data, per chapter basically data, then in the numbered verses category of Quran, which is 6,236 numbered verses, we observe again the same coding pattern exists over the chapter level data of Quran. So the reason I tested okay, let me read this again first. The ultimate evidence showed that we could rewrite the full text of Quran with its natural text numbers per verse. This code will show that The exact same rewriting coding pattern also exists if we use chapter level data. And let me explain why we test on the chapter level data based on rules. The Besmele verse, the first verse of Quran, is again the key coding pattern here. Since Besmele verse is a special verse which is used before all the chapters of Quran, except the 9th chapter. As per the rule, the key coding patterns of our Besmele are tested for both verse and chapter level data as the key coding patterns, because Besmele is related to verse and also chapters as well. It's a special verse. It appears over the beginning of each chapter except this one. And therefore, it is considered also related to chapters of Quran. Therefore, we test the key coding pattern over the Besmele on the chapter level data too, not only verse level data. We call the key coding pattern. It has chapter index 1, verse index 1, number of words 4, and letters 19. And again, when we concatenate, we get this number. Therefore, the same coding pattern exists over the full text of Quran, considering the numbered verses, 6,236 numbered verses as well, considering the chapter level data of the text. The ultimate evidence of chapter level data, chapter 114 again, plus 1, and total verse in chapter 114. This is different part. Right now, we don't use the index of each verse, but the total number of verses in that chapter. This is the chapter level data. And then total verse over in this chapter and total letters in this chapter. So we get, again, they are natural numbers, but at chapter level data. Only we have chapter index here. Again, from the first chapter, the first chapter has 7 in total verses and 29 words and 143 letters. This is the Al-Fatiha, chapter Al-Fatiha, first chapter. And then next chapter, second chapter, and goes on. The last one is 114 chapter, and then before that, 113 chapter. So when we concatenate them in the same way, in the rewriting way, and then with the same key coding pattern, including all chapter, verse, word, and letter information in the natural order, then we get this big number in this way, and the number of digits is 1,205 digits length code. This is multiple of 19. And this is the exact number you can see. Again, chapter Al-Fatiha, the first chapter, the second chapter, the last chapter, 114, the 113, chapter 113, and so on. It goes. So the same exact key coding pattern of the ultimate evidence in the Besmele verse exists over the full text of Quran at the verse level data and also at the chapter level data. The one on the verse level is comprising all the 6,348 verses, and the one in the chapter level data is based on the numbered verses only. So we have in total 4 trials, 2 successes with the probability of 1/19, even in the small system part. Al-Fatiha source key coding pattern based evidence with digit sum, general verse index, and letters per word over all the 6,348 verses. And this new code is based on Al-Fatiha. So let me remind, we have 3 sources: the first chapter Al-Fatiha, the first verse Besmele, and the chapter special verse, chapter 8320. And we already observed 2 codes right now so far based on Besmele and chapter 8320. Now we are going to see a new code. It is based on Al-Fatiha. This one, this is the code and coding pattern of this verse. Let me first show the key coded pattern. If we use the general verse index, as we see here, the general verse index, the number of letters per verse in the verse. So the general verse index and the number of letters per verse in the verse. And again, we take the digit sum of these numbers. Then we get this big number and this multiple of 19 in the full text of Quran, considering 6,348 verses. And why did we try this? Because it's we observe this key coding pattern over the chapter Al-Fatiha, which is one of the source of Quran, key coding pattern source of Quran, I considered. And let's look at this one. And here we have, for example, this is Basmala verse, the first verse of the first chapter Al-Fatiha verse. As we see, the general verse index is 1, and Basmala verse has in total 19 letters. But if you write them from right to left, Bismillah, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Bism here 3 letters. Allah has 4 letters. Al-Rahman has 6 letters, and Al-Rahim has 6 letters. So 3, 4, 6, 6. And it has the general, this is the verse, this represents that verse, Basmala verse. And this is the general verse index, basically general verse order over all the verses. So if you do the same, okay, second verse, and their number of letters per verse, they are written, and the third verse, and their number of letters per word, and so on. And we have the 7th general verse index 7, and these are the number of letters per word in that verse. Basically, we replace them in the text with these key coding base coded numbers per verse. And if you do that in the Al-Fatiha, the resultant number from Al-Fatiha is multiple of 19. So I consider that as key coding pattern, and because of the rules, I will cast all the codes, successive codes over the Al-Fatiha in the full text of Quran too, which I did, and then I observed that it also exists over the full text of Quran. So I assumed again, this was also a key coding pattern left in the Quran, in the first chapter of Al-Fatiha, and we also find that over the full text of Quran. And this is how we get that. And here, there's a mistake here. So this digit sum is not here. Basically, only one digit sum. We have the red ones. They are not there. This one is correct. I should correct this part. Basically, we look at only the digit sum of the full number that we get from this concatenation. So we only concatenate all the numbers from right to left again, and then observe the whole coding number, and then we look at the digit sum. Basically, because of the digit sum operation, it doesn't matter which order it is, from right to left or left to right, it's the same. Therefore, it's left like that. And if you look at the digit sum of the final code from 6,348 verses, we get this number, 433,922. And it is multiple of 19, but not only multiple of 19, twice multiple of 19. 19 times, 1,202. So it's multiple of 19, twice multiple of 19. So this key coding pattern exists in both Al-Fatiha and in full text of Quran. So 19 by 19 ensures that this simple looking coding patterns is most likely by design. So we observed so far 3 codes based on key coding patterns from Basmala verse, chapter 8320, and Al-Fatiha. First verse Al-Fatiha, first chapter Al-Fatiha. Rewriting the full text with general verses and chapter indexes, words and letters over all the 6,348 verses. And we see this key coding pattern again in this special verse 8320, a numbered book it is. And in this book, if you look at the 6,348 all verses, its general verse index is 5,949. So if you write this general verse index again in the natural order first, and then next the chapter index A3, and then this time we don't use the special verse index because we already have general verse index here, and then the number of words 2, and then number of letters 9. This number, when we concatenate, again is multiple of 19. Now the rule was all the codes successfully observed in these key coding pattern sources, that one of them Basmala, this verse 8320 and chapter Al-Fatiha, then we have to test them in the full text of Quran too. and because we assume they are left as key coding patterns. And I did, and I discovered this code based on this key coding pattern. So I discovered that it's also a key coding pattern. Okay. Moreover, the exact same key coding pattern also exists in the first verse of the Quran, which is the Basmala verse. It has the general verse index 1, chapter index 1, number of verse 4, and 19, basically equivalent of the special verse index case, 1, 1, 4, 19, which is also multiple of 19. Since the general verse index is independent from the special verse index, this key coding pattern is also considered as a new one, as we test it over the general verse indexes. Anyways, we have two key coding patterns, but one was enough. We already observed in this key coding pattern, and we assume this is the primary one because it has a special, it's the general verse index based on this specific text type, all of the verses, not the numbered one only. But this Basmala verse key coding pattern supports the observation, the key coding pattern. Then we can write this way, last general verse index, chapter index, last chapter index, and then total verse in the last verse of the chapter, and then total letters in the last verse of the chapter 414. Similarly, we go down to the first verse, which is general verse index 1, chapter 1, total words in the verse 1 of chapter 1, and total letters in verse 1 of chapter 1. So if we replace them with the real numbers, we get again, as we see here, 1 general verse index 1, and then let me see if this is. So I correct this typo, general verse index 1 of the Basmala, and then chapter index 1, and number of words 4, and 19 number of letters. Similarly, next general verse index 2, and then the chapter index 1, and number of words, number of letters. They are concatenated in this natural order from right to left again because there's letters information. And then the last one, last general verse index is 6,348, chapter index 114, number of words 3, letters 13. And the previous general verse index was 6,347, and goes on. So when you concatenate all of these numbers together, you get in this way this final number that represents the full text of Quran again. And this big number has 58,714 digits. And this complements in a way the ultimate code. Remember, in the ultimate code, instead of the general verse index, we use special verse index after the chapter information here. But now we use, instead of the special verse index, the general verse index in the same exact key coding pattern, but using general verse index. They complement each other. And miraculously, this is also multiple of 19. And this is the bigger code. It didn't fit into the screen, the presentation. But the last one, as you see here, 6,348, 114, and so on, it goes there. You can see the full number from my book and test it yourself. Is the total numbers used key coding pattern evidence based on the verse level text data over all the numbered 6,236 verses. So the total numbers based evidence. This code shows that Quran text can be rewritten with its natural text number totals per verse as seen on the text, considering the 6,236 numbered verses. So where do we get this key coding pattern? Again, from the special verse, the number book, it is chapter 83, verse 20. So remember, we had already tested the first coding pattern from these natural numbers of this verse, 83, 20 to 9. It already exists in Quran, we know that, the ultimate evidence. And the next one was obvious, the totals of these natural numbers, 83 plus 20 plus 2.2 plus 9. It gave us 114, the number of chapters. So right now in this code, we use this key coding pattern as key coding pattern, and also test this over the full text of Quran, and I discovered after this total numbers based evidence. The supportive key coding pattern of the total numbers based evidence as a fact is this one. The totals of the natural number of the text, namely total numbers of chapters, words and letters, information, are multiple of 19, considering the text type of all the 6,348 words as follows. As we see, total number of chapters, 114, total number of verses, 6,348, and total number of words and letters. When you sum them up, you get this number, which is a multiple of 19. This is a supportive fact because total numbers is not the main source of the key coding patterns, but we observe that clearly here. Right now in this one, this is the main key coding pattern from the verse, special verse we observe. But because it is not specific to any text type, we have to test this over both text types. So the numbered verses and also all the numbers. So we observe this key coding pattern exists over the numbered verses, 6,536 numbered verses. So we have 2 tries, 1 success. But interestingly, if you look at the total numbers, we also see this in all the verses. But by the rules, I don't take this as an evidence, just as a supportive fact right now. Okay, total number-based evidence. We apply the key coding pattern from the verse 8-320 over all the numbered verses of Quran. As a reminder, as per the rule, whenever we have letters data of a single text type, we always use writing direction of Arabic, which is right to left, as I consider this pattern as rewriting over a single text type, which means either 6,348 verses or 6,236 verses of Quran, numbered verses of Quran. And again, basically what we do, we just sum this chapter index, verse index, and the number of words and number of letters, like this in Basmala. We get a number that represents this verse, and we place this wherever we see in the text, most right of the text, basically. And then we do the same thing for the next verse, verse 2. If you sum their numbers, it represents this verse. And then you just replace those verses with their representation number per verse. And in the end, you end up with the last verse, for it is in the chapter 114. It is the special verse index 6, number of words 3, and then number of letters 13. And then we again concatenate in the natural order, from right to left for letters. And we get a big representation number of the Quran. And it is, as you see, the same numbers. Numbers are summed per verse and then concatenated, and we get this number. And the number of digits of this big number is 17,719 digits length code, which is again multiple of 19. And this is the exact number, big number, that represents the full text of Quran based on totals of per verse, totals, natural numbers per verse. This is quite miraculous, actually, if you consider the other codes together we had observed by concatenation, and we also see again by totals as well on the same rewriting coding pattern. So far we have seen 5 codes. And the next one, rewriting the full text of Quran with general verse index and just sum over all the 6,348 verses. So in this case, we again look at one of the key coding pattern sources, which is chapter 8.3.20, verse 20. And we had already observed these clear key coding patterns in this verse and also in full text of Quran too. But now there's another one. If you look at this general verse index from considering the 6,348 verses of Quran, this special verse has the general verse index 5,949. Basically, it is general order of this verse in the Quran. And if we concatenate this general verse index with number of words and number of letters, we get this number. And the digit sum of this number is 38. And it is a multiple of 19 times 2. Now this is a key coding pattern. By the rules, I have to test this over the full text of Quran. If successful, or if not successful, I have to include such trials in my general probability calculation of the overall system. I did that, and I discovered this new code, because this also exists. Digit sum of this number also exists over the full text of Quran 2. Because this is, as we observe, digit sum per verse, we are going to do the same thing over the full text of Quran 2, digit sum per verse. We will do that. In this case, what happens, as we see, we place Basmala verse 1 for 19 general verse index of Basmala is 1. It has 4 words and 19 letters. We concatenate them and take the digit sum of that represents this verse. And then we do the same for the next verse, take digit sum, and we concatenate them again from right to left in the natural order for letter-spaced numbers, codes. And then we get a big representation number, as we see here, digit sum per verse. And then we get 15, 15, and then last 28, 27. And the number of digits is 12,693 in this case, and it's multiple of 19. And this is the code from this key code and pattern-based code as well. Yeah. So this is a rewriting right now, but digit sum per verse. If you recall, we had done something similar, and it is here. Yeah. In this one, I think, come back here. Okay, this code was Al-Fatiha source code. Again, in this one, we had a digit sum of the whole number, all of the numbers. Again, the order was it's supposed to be right, left, or left, right, doesn't matter, because of we take only one digit sum. It is the same number. I have written this way, but by the rule, I have to write from right to left, so I need to change the slide. In my book, the code has the script has from right to left, but doesn't matter from left to right. That's why it's written like that. The same code, if we take similar code, let's say similar coding pattern, with digit sum for general verse index and the number of digits per number of letters per words is giving us again similar key coding pattern based on digit sum, but now we have digit sum based one here. Okay. So we have done the sixth one, and the next one is seventh code of the system, rewriting system. Rewriting the full text with general verse index and digit sum and letters per word over all the 6,348 verses. So where does it come from again? This has come from the same special verse, chapter 8.3, verse 20. In this verse, in the previous one, remember, we had taken the general verse index 2, and then the number of letters were 9. When we tested that over the full text of Quran, we observed digit sum of that is 38. It exists over the full text of Quran too. But now, if we separate this number of total letters per verse into the number of letters per word, and then concatenate in the natural order again from right to left, as we have seen in text per word, and then we get this number. And if we take the digit sum of that, that's equivalent to what we had seen before. But we have to test over the full text of Quran too, this case, because in the full text of Quran, it doesn't have to be equivalent. Therefore, we take that into account in our full number of trials that we include in the probability calculation of the overall system. And I did that. I discovered this code. This key coding pattern also exists over the full text of Quran if we write the code in this way and take the digit sum. And this code appears like that. Remember, in the Basmala we have 149. Right now we have 146643, for example. And then for all the others, 24, and then the number of letters per word written in the same way. And we have taken digit sum per verse again, similarly. And then we get this big number. As you see, we have a different number right now. For Basmala, we have 24, and the next verse, we have 24. If you look at the previous code, we had 15, 15, not the exact same code, but they are different codes. And it had number of digits, around 12,000. We have right now number of digits in total around 13,000, 14,000. In total, we have 13,944 digits length big code from this key coding pattern based code. And then this is a full code we can see here, 2424, for example. Here we had seen in here 2424, the first one 3745, 3745 we can see here. So this is the big code that represents full text of Quran based on, again, chapter 83, verse 20. The numbered book it is, and we see how it is numbered. So they all shows us how to rewrite the full text of Quran based on numbers of the text, natural numbers of text. So far we have seen 7 code pairs with the letters information sourced by the 3 main sources: Al-Fatiha, Basmala, the first verse, Al-Fatiha, first chapter, and the chapter 83:20, which says a numbered book it is, which shows how it is numbered. So we've the 7 key coding pattern base codes sourced by the main key coding pattern sources, namely Al-Fatiha, Basmala, and chapter 83, verse 20. And we have in total, when I counted from my book, all the other possibilities, 16 trials could be tested in total regarding the rules, with p probability of 1/19. If we use the binomial test for just rough calculation, maybe not precise, but just roughly, we calculate the probability of observing such a system of 7 code pairs randomly as 8.3 times 10 to the power minus 6. And namely, this is around 1 in 119,331 chances. Just to be sure, maybe we can add some more trials randomly in case if we are missing some more trials. If we add 8 more trials just for safety, let's say we have 24 trials instead of 16 that I counted. In that case, just in case, to see more conservative probability, we get 1.7 times 10 to the power minus 4. And this gives us 1 in 5,714 chances. And they are low enough probability to conclude that this is a design. Since I had observed 7 pairs, that reminded me this verse in Quran, chapter 15, verse 87, the 7 pair, because 7 pair mentioned in Quran. Surely we have given you the 7 pairs with the great Quran. You can see in this verse. And the 7 pairs of the Quran might potentially be the miraculous 19 system of the 7 pairs of the 2 groups of key coding pair base codes I present in my book, because this is not only 7 pairs I observed. There is also another group of 7 pairs of codes, another system parts of the full 19 system. We can see in my book, it's based on Al-Fatiha. So I see Al-Fatiha based 9 codes. So it has key coding pattern from only Al-Fatiha. And now here I have seen from those 3 main sources, I have seen another 7 pairs. So maybe there one or either of them or both of them might be mentioned in this verse. So either the Al-Fatiha based 7 pairs or the 7 pairs about the rewriting system I've just presented, the parts might potentially be about the 7 pairs with the Great Quran, because the scholars are not fully agreeing on the meaning of this verse, what exact 7 pairs it refers. In general, they think it's Al-Fatiha. Even if it's Al-Fatiha, we see over the Al-Fatiha 7 pairs of codes just based on Al-Fatiha. Maybe it's referred to that, or it might refer to another 7 pairs as well. So we should consider that. Since I have seen that, I wanted to see if there is a special key coding pattern in this one as well. And I found another rewriting key coding pattern on this exact verse. So I give that as a fact here, not the part of this 7 pairs system I showed, but that's another interesting one. It complements the ultimate evidence in a way. And in this verse, we see it is the 992nd verse when we count from the first verse, considering all the 6,348 verses. It has 7 words and 36 letters. So when concatenated, we observe a key coding pattern as it is multiple of 19 as follows. General verse index of this verse, 7 pairs verse, and then it has 7 words in it. Interestingly, 7 pairs verse has 7 words in it, by the way. And then it has 36 letters. When you concatenate, you see a number, potential key coding pattern, as multiple of 19. So I assumed it might be because I have seen 2 7 pairs of code in Quran so far, and this verse might be referring to them. And it might also include another key coding pattern in it. I hypothesized, and I therefore considered as a potential key coding pattern. I tested over the full text of Quran and discovered another code in the full text of Quran based on this verse. This key code pattern exists over the full text of Quran too. So if you do that the same way, as we see general verse index of the first verse and the number of words and the number of letters. And the second general verse index, number of words and number of letters. When you concatenate all of it, we witness that there is another key code pattern-based rewriting code in the full text of Quran. And this complements the ultimate evidence, because in the ultimate evidence, instead of general verse index, we use what? The corresponding chapter index and the special verse index, but the same total number of words and letters. And here, we see the same exact coding can be done with only general verse indexes instead of the chapter and special verse indexes in it. So from any of those potential indexes we could use, either chapter or general verse, chapter and special verse index to point at a verse we could use, or general verse index to point a verse we could use. We observe the same exact key coding pattern. From right to left, we can write the full text of Quran. And if you do that with the real numbers, from the full text of Quran, we see in the end this number, 19, 1 for 19, that represents Basmala, general verse index, and the second one, and the last one, 6,348 is last verse, general verse index, and then the number of words and the number of letters in it. And then next general verse index, 6,347, and number of words has 5, and number of letters has 20, and then when you concatenate all of them, you get this big number, 47,284 digits code that represents full text of Quran, and it's multiple of 19. And this is the exact number, big number. Another code as a fact, not as an evidence, I want to present is the rewriting evidence with the number of letters of each word. And this code is sourced from the verse, chapter 89, verse 3. And that kind of complements the ultimate evidence by showing that the full text of Quran can be rewritten even with the number of letters per word in a verse. Again, this is a fact, not a part of the 7-pair system I presented so far. This is kind of supporting fact. It might be part of the system. And the reason I have considered this verse is, let me show you again. And this verse says this, chapter 89, verse 3, by the even and the odd. So based on this verse, I had hypothesized that there might be even and odd coding pattern in the Quran, and in the Al-Fatiha based system, the 7 pairs, I have observed that because it was the most important system part in my opinion, and it was available there. I was expecting that to be there, and I observed that. So I also checked if this verse, special verse, has itself a key coding pattern, and I found this key coding pattern also exists over the full text of Quran. And let's see, what is it? So if you look at the chapter index of this verse, 89, the verse index, special verse index 3, and number of verse 2. And instead of the number of total letters, which is 12 in this case, if we can write number of letters per word, here 66, then we get this representation number per verse, and it is multiple of 19. I tested over the full text of Quran and observed that it exists over the 6,236 numbered verses. And this is the general reflection. Again, for Basmala, we can see what the difference more clearly. Chapter index 1, special verse index 1, and it has the words, number of words 4. And now, instead of total number of letters, 19, we write them separately per word, number of letters per word. Basmala, Bismillah, Bism, 3 letters, and then Allah has 4 letters, and then Al-Rahman, 6 letters, Al-Rahim, 6 letters, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So this is the Basmala verse. And if you write this way, instead of the previous, the ultimate evidence way, it was taking all these numbers as 19, total letters per verse. We also observe that the same exact or same similar coding pattern exists over the full text of Quran too. And this is based on the even and odd code. Conclusion, again, I'm not considering right now, I didn't provide a probability of these additional codes. They are facts right now. Conclusion, overall, the present rewriting 19 system codes, the 7 of them, I mentioned those based on 3 main sources, Basmala, Al-Fatiha, and the chapter 83, verse 20. The numbered book it is, and not the additional 2 ones, they're the supportive ones. When I say system codes, I mean the ones with evidences, not the ones as I present as facts, interesting facts. Overall, the presented rewriting 19 system codes suggests that the key coding pattern-based miraculous 19 system of Quran was designed by the author of Quran, God, to assure us that it is intact. Because if they were not, they were distorted, we could not see those system, even a single word or letters would be enough to collapse the system. You can read my book for more details of this system and details of this system and more other codes, like the one based on Al-Fatiha, without letters information especially. They together make the whole 19 system. Final thoughts. I want to read some verses about that. Quran, chapter 15, verse 9. It is we who have sent down the reminder, which is Quran, and indeed it is we who will preserve it. Quran 74:30. Over it is 19. Quran 74:31. And we have not made the keepers of the fire except angels, and we have not made their number except as a trial for those who disbelieve, that those who were given the scripture will be convinced, and those who have believed will increase in faith. And those who were given the scripture and the believers will not doubt, and that those in whose hearts is hypocrisy and the disbelievers will say, what does Allah intend by this as an example? Does Allah leave astray whom He wills and guides whom He wills? And none knows the soldiers of your Lord except Him. And mention of the fire is not but a reminder to humanity. And Quran, chapter 41, verse 53. We will show them our signs in the universe. We will show them our signs in the universe and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that this Quran is the truth. Is it not enough that your Lord is a witness over all things? So this is why we expect such signs, such evidences that assures us. Quran chapter 6, verse 25. Among them are some who listen to you, but we have placed covers over their hearts, so they do not understand the Quran, and deafness in their ears. Even if they saw every sign, they would not believe in them. Even if they saw every sign, they would not believe in them. So when they come to you, they argue with you. The disbelievers say, these are nothing but ancient fables. Thank you for listening. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. And also in my social media account.